body you have. Why, you're quite the dolphin, aren't you?
It's not easy being a lady.
Yeah, I tell you, you're absolutely hair-free.
There is something genuinely fascinating about watching a professional talk show host, someone who does this for a living, someone who has interviewed hundreds of people and knows exactly how to stay composed and in control of a conversation, suddenly fall completely apart the moment a particularly stunning guest walks onto the set. These are people who are trained to keep things moving, to ask the next question, to hold the room, to maintain some basic level of dignity on live television. And yet, every so often, something happens that just completely short-circuits all of that professional experience and leaves the host standing there looking like a nervous teenager at their first school dance. It is one of the most entertaining things that television has ever produced, not because it is mean or embarrassing in a cruel way, but because it is so completely and utterly human. These moments remind you that underneath all the preparation and the rehearsed charm and the carefully controlled studio environment, everyone is capable of losing the plot when the situation calls for it. Before we get into some of the most memorable moments of talk show hosts completely losing their composure on live television, if you enjoy this kind of content that celebrates the funny, unscripted, genuinely human side of entertainment, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. We are building a community of people who love great television moments and the kind of honest, unfiltered content that you cannot plan or rehearse. Every subscriber helps this channel grow and helps us keep finding and sharing the best moments from the world of entertainment. So join us, hit that subscribe button, and let us get into some truly classic television. Let us start with Conan O'Brien, because Conan is someone who built an entire career on being quick, sharp, and always one step ahead of whatever was happening in the room. He is genuinely one of the wittiest hosts to ever sit behind a late-night desk, with the ability to turn almost any situation into a joke and keep the energy moving no matter what happens. So it is particularly wonderful when Conan gets completely derailed, and it happened more than once. One of the most talked about instances involved Jennifer Tilly, whose appearance on the show left Conan in a state that can only be described as completely non-functional. He started the interview in his usual confident style, and within about 30 seconds was stammering, tugging at his collar, making observations about the temperature of the studio, and essentially announcing to the entire viewing audience that he was having serious difficulty forming coherent sentences. He tried to recover multiple times, started sentences, lost them entirely, and eventually just acknowledged what everyone could already see, that he was having an extremely hard time that evening and was not entirely sure why, though the reason was fairly obvious to everyone watching. What made it so funny was not just that Conan was flustered, but that he kept trying to pretend he was not flustered while being very obviously flustered. He would attempt a normal interview question, sort of get it out, and then the follow-up would trail off into nothing. He apologized for his inability to speak normally. He observed that it was perhaps a little warm in the studio. He made observations about jewelry. He complimented the dress in a way that suggested he was desperately searching for something safe to focus on. The audience loved every second of it, because Conan losing control of an interview is so rare and so unexpected that when it happens, it feels like a genuine event. Nina Dobrev's appearance on Conan's show produced another unforgettable moment, though this one was more physical than verbal. Dobrev had mentioned that she practiced yoga, and Conan, in the way that talk show hosts do, asked if she would demonstrate a move. What followed was a sequence of events that Conan clearly was not entirely prepared for, as Dobrev proceeded to use Conan himself as a prop for her demonstration, positioning herself in a way that left Conan looking very much like a man who had completely forgotten what program he was hosting. His reaction, the expression on his face, the complete loss of whatever conversational thread he had been trying to maintain, became the kind of moment that gets clipped and shared endlessly because it captures something so genuine and unplanned. Conan also had an interview with Salma Hayek that belongs in the same category. Hayek arrived wearing a dress that prompted Conan to essentially stop being a functioning talk show host and just become a person sitting in a studio having a personal crisis. He asked about the dress, he apologized for asking about the dress, he said things that trailed off. He declared his feelings in a way that was both completely inappropriate for a professional television interview and absolutely hilarious because of how genuinely overwhelmed he appeared. Hayek, for her part, seemed to find the whole thing amusing rather than uncomfortable, which only made the audience enjoy it more. She even gently told him not to be creepy, at which point Conan essentially agreed with her assessment of himself and moved on, though not without a few more moments of visible struggle. Johnny Carson was another host whose composure was almost legendary. Carson ran The Tonight Show for decades and was known for his ability to handle absolutely anything that came his way with grace, timing, and total control. He had a cool to him that seemed almost unshakable, which is why the moments when Bo Derek sat across from him are so remarkable to watch. Derek had become one of the most talked about women in the world following her appearance in the film that made her famous, and when she came onto Carson's show, something genuinely unusual happened. Carson, the man who had interviewed presidents and movie stars and comedians and musicians without ever losing his footing, started talking about her eyes. He started leaning toward her. He made a comment about wanting to share a chair with her. He admitted, live on television with complete sincerity, that for reasons he could not entirely explain, he was feeling uncomfortable in a way that he was not accustomed to feeling. He said he had spoken to thousands of people over the years and could not recall feeling like this, which was quite a statement from someone who had made a career out of never seeming rattled. The audience went completely wild because they knew they were watching something real, a genuine crack in the composed exterior of one of television's great professionals. David Letterman's encounter with Eva Longoria is another moment that fits this pattern perfectly, though what made Letterman's situation interesting was that he seemed genuinely thrown not just by her appearance, but by her personality. Longoria was sharp, confident, and had a quality about her that seemed to constantly keep Letterman slightly off balance. He tried to ask questions in his usual, slightly detached and ironic style, and she kept responding in ways that redirected the energy of the conversation. At one point, he noted that she was an enormous star globally, and she responded in a way that essentially agreed with him, while somehow making the agreement itself funny, which left Letterman laughing in a slightly helpless way. He made the observation at one point that he had never seen anyone quite as breathtaking in his life, which for Letterman was an extraordinarily unguarded thing to say on camera. He then immediately questioned why she was doing this to him, as if her mere presence was something she was inflicting on him intentionally. Norm Macdonald was also present during part of this interview, and his response was equally candid. He described himself as a fat old man and said that simply sitting beside someone like her was more than he could process. Letterman pointed out that Norm had suddenly started speaking like an old Southern gentleman, which Norm took in good humor. The whole segment had an energy of three people who were all aware that something unusual was happening in the room and had collectively decided to just acknowledge it rather than pretend otherwise. The moments involving Borat, the character created by Sacha Baron Cohen, occupy a slightly different category because the comedy in those interactions came from something different. Rather than a host losing composure because of attraction or admiration, the Borat moments worked because the character was so aggressively and deliberately inappropriate that the people around him had no idea how to respond. His encounter with singer Melanie Blatt, who was married at the time, involved comments and suggestions that were so far outside the boundaries of normal television behavior that everyone in the room seemed to collectively freeze and then burst into laughter because laughter was the only reasonable response. The genius of the Borat character was that it put ordinary people in situations they had absolutely no script for, and the genuine human reactions that followed were always funnier than anything scripted could have been. Keith Lemon, the British comedian character created by Lee Francis, had a similar ability to create genuine, unscripted chaos during television appearances. His segment with Liv Tyler was a perfect example of this. He arrived with a gift, made jokes that were just barely on the acceptable side of the line, flirted with Tyler in a way that was so obviously performed and theatrical that it became funny rather than uncomfortable, and then was genuinely caught off guard when Tyler seemed to take some of it more seriously than he had expected. The moment where it became apparent that Tyler's partner was actually present only added another layer to the whole thing. Keith Lemon's comedy worked precisely because it created situations that nobody in the room had quite prepared for, and the genuine reactions of the people around him were the actual punchline. Stephen Merchant's attempt to use chat-up lines on Nicole Scherzinger was another moment of manufactured awkwardness that became genuinely funny because of how real the reactions were. Merchant, who is extremely tall and has a very particular brand of self-aware, slightly awkward humor, tried out a series of lines on Scherzinger in what was framed as a comedy exercise. The exchange that followed was funny, not because the lines were particularly clever, but because Scherzinger's reactions were so genuinely unfiltered. She was not performing surprise or amusement. She was actually surprised and actually amused, and the combination of Merchant's lanky commitment to the bit and her completely real responses made the whole thing land beautifully. Chris Rock's interview with a female celebrity produced a running joke throughout the entire segment because Rock essentially stopped pretending to be a neutral interviewer and just spent the conversation openly acknowledging that he found his guest incredibly attractive. He made jokes that were barely jokes. They were essentially just compliments dressed up in enough comedy packaging to be acceptable on television. He told her she would never have to cook for him. He suggested that people should forget his movie and just come to see her. He maintained this throughout the interview without any apparent embarrassment, which is itself a comedic choice, the decision to just fully commit to the bid rather than dial it back when it might have been more professional to do so. The audience found it funny because Rock is naturally charming enough to pull off a level of flirtation that would seem inappropriate from anyone else, and because he seemed completely aware of what he was doing while doing it anyway. What all of these moments have in common is authenticity. They work because they are real. The stammering, the compliments that go slightly too far, the questions that trail off, the expressions that say everything without words. None of it was written in any script. These were human beings responding to other human beings in the most honest and unguarded way, and the cameras happened to be rolling. In a world of television that is heavily produced and carefully managed, these genuine, unscripted moments of real human reaction are genuinely precious. They remind you that no amount of preparation can fully armor someone against the experience of being completely caught off guard by another person. The hosts who feature in these moments are all talented professionals at the top of their field. Conan O'Brien, Johnny Carson, David Letterman, these are not people who struggle to hold a conversation. They are among the best in the world at exactly that skill, which is precisely what makes it so entertaining when they completely fall apart. The contrast between their normal, polished composure and the absolute chaos that replaces it in these moments is what creates the comedy. And the fact that they are usually self-aware enough to acknowledge what is happening, to make a joke about their own inability to function normally, only makes it better. These moments have been shared and rewatched millions of times because they capture something that people respond to on a very deep level. The idea that everyone, no matter how professional, no matter how experienced, no matter how many times they have sat across from famous and beautiful people on a television set, is still capable of just completely losing the thread when the right person walks in the room. It is reassuring in a way, it is funny in a way, and it is the kind of television that no amount of scripting or planning could ever produce deliberately. If you enjoyed this look at some of the most genuinely funny and unscripted moments in talk show history, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. We find and celebrate the moments from entertainment that are real, funny, and completely human. Drop a comment below about your favorite moment from this collection or any other talk show moment that you think belongs on this list. We would love to hear from you, and we will see you in the next one.